everybody, my name is Alex. You've probably heard that everywhere in the world can have fires. But one place that have fires called the Queen of the West inside the US is the Great Chicago Fire in 1871. And now, today, let me introduce you to the Great Chicago Fire. The Chicago Fire started in 1871. The fire was huge. Their stinky smell smelled like rodents. At that time, people don't usually take baths, so they are very stinky. And it filled the whole entire world with the ashes and smokes, and it's like smelling thousands of rodents and smoke and ash air everywhere. At first, there is a huge ball of orange, yellow, and red, and even white, and they turned to the ground and stretched far, far, far away. For example, the Hindenburg disaster was an example. For my details about the Great Chicago Fire, which about the fires and that. And also, the Great Chicago Fire killed millions of lives, about 1,000 or even 1,000,000. But one thing we know for sure is that the Great Chicago Fire is a dangerous fire. At first, it was called the Queen of the West. It means that it is of the West. Chicago is the most beautiful place that people call. There are wagons and trains crisscrossing tracks everywhere. It seems like one whole giant squiggle at the time. And also, there are some stinky and factories and also power plants, and they give off smoke too. There are also some lakes there, the Great Lakes there, and there are also a transporting system. And soon the fire spread into the lake, and the boats and ships died, sucking into the water. And also, then some houses were standing. Now people definitely saw what was going on. There are fires everywhere, burning the shores. People lost their families. Mothers and children have to go to each other. They have to go into warehouses, basements, and other houses. And later, just a few hours later, the burning kept still burning and burning the roads, the train tracks, the trains, the wagons. Even the horse ran away. Even the rodents seemed scared. And some people ran away too. They ran into one of the few houses that are still remaining to stand, such as the warehouses, the firehouses, and other houses, about how and why the Great Chicago Fire was then built. And the Great Chicago Fire was at that time was after disaster. After that disaster, the Chicago have to be built again, so that then it will be a beautiful, beautiful city near the lake. So it is that Chicago was a beautiful city now and was reconstructed a few years later. It then take a decade even 2 decades to rebuild the city again. So, then Chicago was a beautiful place. Today, Chicago have some million people everywhere. And now it is a beautiful city, not like the Great Chicago Fire at that time. When the wagons were popular, people were crisscrossing the streets and roads and avenues. And there are also train tracks crisscrossing the roads. People sometimes have accidents and bump into each other with the horses and wagons just flying everywhere. Some people don't like the area, but others loved it. They call it the Queen of the West at that time. It is west of the Mississippi River, and the Great Chicago Fire was never to be forgotten. About some stories about the Great Chicago Fire. For example, I've heard the story I survived the Great Chicago Fire, and I have heard that people said that the Great Chicago Fire. People said that who knows what caused the Great Chicago Fire? Maybe it's because of some warehouses building the smokestacks and releasing the CO2 and greenhouse gases, the fossil fuels into the air and create a substance like a mineral in the air and then flew down and turned into a huge ball of gas. And soon it spread everywhere, for about kilometers to miles. It was very long. Yes, and so about a few kilometers. And so the Great Chicago Fire lasted for long, some hours. And it was really true that the Great Chicago Fire was the most popular fire in the U.S. But soon the Californian fire caused it. And soon other fires inside the U.S. formed. We need to protect our world from these fires. And the Great Chicago Fire was one example. And soon we know today that Chicago was a beautiful city. And it borders the Great Lakes. We can go on parks and turn into downtowns of the Chicago, and there are tall buildings up in the sky. And soon now, after the 1871 Great Chicago Fire, now it was now rebuilt and then called the beautiful city of the West, remaining behind New York, I should say. And also, we know that Chicago today is a beautiful, transporting, and no sticky and smelly city. And now we know more about the Great Chicago Fire, its details, its main details, and about where the fire spread, and about some towns and villages inside it, such as Castle or other towns that are badly damaged and hurt about the Great Chicago Fire. But soon it is a beautiful transporting city at the time, and soon people stopped building wood, which is the most favorite food for the fire. And soon they stopped the rodents and stinky hawk smells. And soon they stopped building factories and built the other downtowns and malls and shops and buildings and apartments. And soon Chicago became a beautiful city after the disaster. And soon we know more about the Great Chicago Fire. We were still thinking about the newspapers when we read the Great Chicago Fire. And that was true. That the Great Chicago Fire was never to be forgotten. A true story, a real story in Chicago, in America, in Illinois, and around the world. People are still talking about this debate of the Great Chicago Fire, and now today. So we have known the facts about the Great Chicago Fire, and the Great Chicago Fire was the most interesting fire I've ever seen. Well, remaining behind the Hindenburg disaster, which I love the most about all of my series of the great fires everywhere inside the world. At that time, I thought that the Chicago was a beautiful transporting city. Instead, it was full of wood and cranes crisscrossing everywhere. About the cities, and about the details, about the facts about the Great Chicago Fire. And now we know more and much more facts about the Great Chicago Fire. It spread it into the lakes, one of the Great Lakes, and soon it was there. The beautiful Chicago City. And this is the end. So goodbye everybody, and thank you for listening.
I have a question. Why Chicago Fire happened?
The Chicago Fire happened because of some mysterious chemicals in the world. In Chicago, in the factories and in the power plants. They give off some minerals. Like fossil fuels into the sky, and soon it creates a big, bright red fire, and soon it spread it for about some hours, about the kilometers, about the fire still. Yeah. And so, you have any more questions?
How many people died in Chicago Fire?
Well, about some couple of thousands, or just of hundreds to thousands, okay? Okay, so now this is the end. And goodbye everybody. Thank you for listening.
More?
Yes, okay.
What difference between Hindenburg disaster and Chicago Fire?
The Chicago Fire is different because it is not inside an airship or a blip. I'm surprised you didn't know that. So this is the end now. And goodbye everybody. Thank you for listening.
Anything else?
Well, a lot of information about the Great Chicago Fire you can find in the Wikipedia or Google. So that's it.
Okay.